Shalom, my friends. Have you ever noticed that the people who sit around waiting for their financial breakthrough never seem to get it, while those who take action, even imperfect action, somehow attract the opportunities they need? Here's what nobody tells you about abundance. Heaven doesn't respond to your wishes, your prayers alone, or your positive thinking. Heaven responds to your movement. Today, I'm going to show you an ancient Torah principle that explains why sitting in expectation keeps you stuck in scarcity, while taking aligned action opens the floodgates of provision. And the best part? This isn't about working harder or hustling yourself into exhaustion. This is about understanding the divine architecture of how abundance actually flows into human life. I'm Rabbi Shimon, the architect of Torah life, and before you click away thinking this is another religious lecture about faith and patience, let me be crystal clear about something. What I'm about to share with you has been solving financial stagnation for over 3,000 years, and it works whether you're religious or completely secular. The Torah isn't just a spiritual book, it's a manual for how reality operates. When you understand the principle of divine partnership, when you grasp why heaven only co-creates with those who move first, everything about your financial situation begins to shift. You stop waiting for miracles and start creating the conditions where miracles can occur naturally. You stop feeling powerless about your money and start recognizing that you've always had more agency than you realized. Most people approach abundance completely backwards, and this mistake costs them years of their lives. They sit in meditation, they affirm positive thoughts, they visualize their dream life, they pray for provision, and then they wait. They wait for the universe to deliver. They wait for their ship to come in. They wait for God to open doors. And while they're waiting, their bank account stays empty, their opportunities pass them by, and their financial anxiety grows deeper every single month. This isn't just ineffective. According to Torah wisdom, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of how heaven operates. The divine system is designed as a partnership, not a delivery service. Heaven provides the resources, the opportunities, the connections, the wisdom, but only in response to your movement, not your expectation. Here's the psychological reality that most spiritual teachers won't tell you. Passive waiting is actually a form of fear masquerading as faith. When you tell yourself you're letting go and letting God, what you're often really doing is avoiding the discomfort of taking action when the outcome is uncertain. Your brain loves this excuse because it protects you from potential failure, rejection, and disappointment. You can tell yourself that you're being spiritual, that you're trusting the process, that you're surrendering to divine timing, when actually, you're just paralyzed by the fear of making the wrong move. This creates a vicious cycle. You wait because you're afraid. You don't see results because you're not moving. The lack of results confirms your fear, so you wait some more. Meanwhile, the people who are willing to move despite their fear are the ones receiving the abundance you're praying for. The Torah teaches this principle in the very first story of divine-human partnership. When the Israelites were trapped at the Red Sea with Pharaoh's army closing in, they cried out to Moses and to God. They prayed, they begged, they complained, and nothing happened. The sea didn't part. No miracle occurred. It wasn't until Nachshon ben Amminadab walked into the water, when he took action despite having no guarantee, when he moved forward even though he couldn't see how it would work out. That's when the waters parted. Heaven was waiting for movement. The moment Nachshon moved, heaven moved with him. This isn't a story about one man's bravery. This is a blueprint for how abundance operates in every area of life. Heaven doesn't respond to your need. Heaven doesn't respond to your prayer alone. Heaven responds to your partnership, to your willingness to move first, even when you can't see the entire path. In Hebrew, there's a concept called hishtadlut, which literally means effort or endeavor, but it represents something far more profound than just hard work. Hishtadlut is the human side of divine partnership. It's the recognition that God provides the blessing, but humans must create the vessel to receive it. Think of it this way: heaven is like electricity, always present, always available, infinitely powerful. But if you don't plug in, if you don't create the circuit, if you don't flip the switch, you stay in darkness. The power is there, the abundance is there, the resources are there, but they can't flow into your life until you create the channel through your action. This is why prayer without action goes unanswered. This is why positive thinking without movement creates nothing. This is why visualization without implementation changes nothing. You're asking for electricity while refusing to build the circuit. The psychology behind this is fascinating, and it aligns perfectly with how your brain actually works. Your reticular activating system, the part of your brain that filters what you notice, doesn't respond to thoughts alone. It responds to committed action. When you take a concrete step toward a goal, your brain interprets this as important and begins highlighting opportunities related to that goal. Suddenly, you notice resources you couldn't see before. You meet people who can help. You discover solutions that were invisible yesterday. This isn't magic. This is neuroscience. But here's what makes it profound. The Torah understood this 3,000 years before we had brain scans. The ancient wisdom recognized that divine flow and human perception work together. When you move, heaven moves with you, not because heaven changes, but because your movement changes your capacity to receive what heaven has always been offering. Let me give you a practical example of how this works. Imagine two people both struggling financially. Both pray for provision. Both visualize abundance. Both affirm positive thoughts. Person A stops there, they wait, they hope, they expect. Person B does all of that and takes action. They update their resume. They reach out to 3 contacts. They research new income streams. They organize their finances. They sign up for that course they've been considering. Now, who do you think attracts the opportunity? Person B, every single time. Not because they're more deserving, not because they have more faith, but because they created the channels through which provision could flow. They didn't just ask heaven for help. They participated in their own rescue. They didn't just hope for a breakthrough. They moved toward it. And in that movement, they encountered the resources, people, and opportunities that had been waiting for them to show up. Here's where this gets really interesting. Movement doesn't just position you to receive abundance, movement actually attracts it. There's a principle in Torah called mitzvah goreret mitzvah, which means one good deed leads to another good deed. But this goes deeper than just ethics. It's describing a law of momentum. When you take action aligned with your values and purpose, you create an energetic frequency that draws similar energy toward you. In modern terms, we'd say you're signaling to the world what you're available for. In Torah terms, we'd say you're aligning yourself with divine flow, and alignment creates magnetic attraction. When you move with purpose, resources move toward you. When you act with clarity, opportunities appear. When you step forward in faith combined with action, the universe rearranges itself to support your momentum. Psychology confirms this with the concept of behavioral momentum. When you take one small action toward a goal, you're far more likely to take the next action. Each step builds psychological momentum, and this momentum carries you forward even when your motivation wavers. But here's what psychology alone can't explain: why taking action often brings opportunities completely unrelated to the action you took. You update your resume looking for a new job, and an unexpected freelance client appears. You organize your finances to save money, and you suddenly remember about a forgotten refund you're owed. You take one small step to improve your business, and someone introduces you to exactly the person you needed to meet. This isn't coincidence. This is the principle of divine partnership. Heaven sees your movement and responds, not always in the way you expected, but always in the way that serves your growth. Your job isn't to control how the provision comes. Your job is to move so that provision has a channel to reach you. The reason most people miss this is because they're attached to specific outcomes. They take action expecting a particular result, and when that exact result doesn't appear, they conclude that action doesn't work. But this completely misses how divine partnership operates. You don't take action to force a specific outcome. You take action to demonstrate your participation, to signal your readiness, to create the conditions where heaven can respond. Sometimes your action produces exactly what you intended. Sometimes it produces something even better that you couldn't have imagined. Sometimes it produces a lesson that prepares you for the next level, but it always produces something, unlike passive waiting, which produces nothing. Movement is the language that heaven understands. Expectation alone is just noise. When you combine prayer with action, faith with effort, trust with movement, that's when you become unstoppable. That's when doors open that you didn't even know existed. So how do you actually implement this? How do you move from passive expectation to active partnership? The Torah gives us a framework, and I'm going to break it down into practical steps you can take this week. First principle, start with clarity before movement. Rushing into random action doesn't work any better than passive waiting. You need to know what you're moving toward. In Hebrew, this is called kavanah, intention. Before you act, get clear. What are you trying to create? What problem are you solving? What does abundance look like in your specific situation? Write it down. Make it concrete. Vague intentions produce vague results. Specific intentions focused with clear action produce specific results. Spend time getting crystal clear on what you actually want, because your movement needs a direction, or it's just noise. Second principle, take the smallest viable action. This is where most people get paralyzed. They wait until they can see the entire path, until they have all the resources, until they feel completely ready. But that's not how divine partnership works. The Torah principle is pitach, open an opening. You don't need to knock down the entire wall. You just need to create a small opening, and heaven will expand it. What's the smallest action you can take today that moves you in the right direction? Not the perfect action, not the complete solution, not the final result, just the next small step. Maybe it's sending one email. Maybe it's making one phone call. Maybe it's organizing one drawer. Maybe it's researching one option. It doesn't matter how small the action is. What matters is that you move, because that movement signals to heaven, I'm ready, I'm participating, I'm showing up. And heaven responds to that signal. Third principle, move with consistency, not intensity. Our culture worships the big dramatic breakthrough, the overnight success, the viral moment, the lottery win. But the Torah teaches yoder midayaf, more than the necessary causes harm. Abundance doesn't come from one massive burst of effort that burns you out. Abundance comes from consistent small actions compounded over time. Think about it. If you took just one small financial action every single day for 30 days, you'd have 30 actions working in your favor. That's 30 channels through which provision can flow. That's 30 signals to heaven that you're serious. That's 30 opportunities for momentum to build. Compare that to someone who does one big thing and then waits for results. One channel versus 30. One signal versus 30. One opportunity versus 30. The difference isn't even close. Consistency beats intensity every single time because consistency demonstrates commitment, and heaven responds to commitment with sustained provision. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Rabbi, this sounds great, but I'm so stuck financially that I don't even know what action to take. I'm paralyzed by debt, by fear, by overwhelm. How do I move when I can barely breathe? I hear you. And I want to address this directly because this is where the Torah wisdom becomes most powerful. When the Israelites were at the Red Sea, they couldn't see any path forward either. Behind them was an army. In front of them was water. They were trapped. Impossible situation. No obvious action. And yet, movement was still possible. Nachshon didn't move because he had a plan. He moved because he chose faith in motion over fear in paralysis. He took the step in front of him, even though he couldn't see step 2. And that's your answer when you feel stuck. You don't need to see the whole path. You just need to take the step that's visible right now. If you're drowning in debt and can't see a way out, what's one tiny action you could take today? Maybe it's calling one creditor to ask about a payment plan. Maybe it's selling one item you don't need. Maybe it's downloading a budget app. Maybe it's watching one video about debt elimination strategies. You're looking for massive solutions when heaven is offering you small doors. You're waiting for a miracle when heaven is waiting for your participation. The breakthrough doesn't come when your situation magically changes. The breakthrough comes when you start moving despite your situation. Because movement in impossible circumstances, that's when faith becomes tangible. That's when trust becomes action. That's when heaven sees your seriousness and responds with provision that defies logic. Here's the truth that will set you free. You're never as stuck as you think you are. Your brain, when overwhelmed, shuts down possibility thinking. It goes into survival mode and tells you there are no options. But that's a lie. There are always options. There's always one small action available to you. Always. The question isn't whether movement is possible. The question is whether you're willing to move before you feel ready, before you see the complete path, before you have guarantees. That's what separates those who break through from those who stay stuck. Not intelligence, not resources, not connections. Just willingness to move when movement feels scary. Just willingness to partner with heaven even when you can't see how it's going to work. Just willingness to take the step in front of you and trust that step too will appear when you need it. That's the door that opens abundance. Not expectation, not waiting, not hoping. Movement. Always movement. Because heaven responds to what you do, not what you wish. Your financial situation can transform, but only if you're willing to become a different kind of person, the kind who partners with heaven through action rather than waiting for heaven to do everything for you. This isn't about hustling yourself into exhaustion. This isn't about forcing outcomes through sheer willpower. This is about understanding that you were designed for partnership with the divine, and partnership requires participation from both parties. Heaven holds infinite resources. Heaven orchestrates opportunities. Heaven arranges connections. But heaven will not force provision into a life that refuses to move. You have to create the channels through your action. You have to signal your readiness through your movement. You have to demonstrate your commitment through your consistency. Here's your challenge for this week. Stop waiting and start moving. Choose one area of your financial life where you've been stuck in expectation and take one concrete action, no matter how small, in the next 24 hours. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, not when you have all the answers. Now, today, with what you have, from where you are. Because that's when transformation begins. Not when your circumstances change, not when you have more money, not when everything is perfect. Transformation begins the moment you stop expecting and start moving. The door that opens abundance is right in front of you. It's not locked. It's not hidden. It never was. You've just been standing in front of it, waiting for it to open itself. But that's not how doors work. You have to turn the handle. You have to take the step. You have to move. And the moment you do, the moment you partner with heaven through action, everything changes. Shalom, my friends. Now let's open that door together.